Welcome back to the Cap Report. Hope y'all are doing well. In this video, we're going to go over my UFC 278 predictions. I feel like this card, kind of like 277, this sort of snuck up on me. I just feel like it hasn't been talked about as much in the build-up as other cards have. But in all fairness, it's not the greatest card. It's a solid one, a little bit top-heavy. You know, the last three fights sort of kind of carry the card. I haven't got to do as much research as I would have liked for this one, so I might not go as in-depth on it. I'll go in order of the card, starting from the bottom, working my way up to the main event. If you're only interested in certain fights, there's going to be timestamps in the description, so you can click just to go to whoever you want to see. For the first few fights, I'm not really going to touch on them that much. I'm just going to give you a prediction. I'm in a little bit of a race against time to get this video out in time before I go to work. I have Tyson Pedro defeating Harry Hunsucker by first round knockout. The second fight's a little confusing to me. It was supposed to be Marcin Tybura versus Alexander Romanov, but apparently now it got moved to the prelims and replaced with Wu Yanan versus Lucy Pudilova. Not really sure why they made this move. Doesn't really improve the card in any way, other than it just gives it more potential markets to sell to. This fight's a toss-up, but I'll take Pudilova by decision. And then I'll throw out a prediction for Tybura Romanov as well, Romanov by decision. Now we move on to the bantamweight division, where Jose Aldo takes on Merab Dvalishvili in what could likely be a number one contender fight, you know, following Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw fighting for the title. Aldo ideally is the next one up. So this could be a number one contender fight in that sense. I mean, Merab's on a 7-fight win streak as well. He's got a mix of finishes and decisions with some nice names on the list: John Dodson, Casey Kenny, Marlon Moraes in there. Aldo comes in on a 3-fight win streak, having beaten Chito Vera, Pedro Munoz, and Rob Font, all by decision, but they were pretty strong performances. The Vera win is aging really well. Merab got caught early in his last fight against Marlon Moraes, but rallied, dominated the fight from that point on. He averages an insane 7.30 takedowns per 50 minutes, so he's averaging like a takedown once every 2 minutes, and has over 50 successful takedowns in his career. That being said, he's fighting one of, if not the greatest anti-wrestler in UFC history in Jose Aldo. Aldo sits at 90% on his takedown defense. Now, Merab has solid striking and throws pretty high volume, but Aldo is definitely a level above him from the striking standpoint. Merab likely will look to push the pace, as that has been the best method against Aldo. That being said, he'll have to be careful about getting into exchanges with Aldo because of his power and his strong technical boxing. I could see him dropping Merab in a similar way to Moraes, slipping a punch, catching him with a looping punch. We've seen Aldo's style morph since moving to bantamweight. He doesn't use the leg kicks nearly as much as he used to. It has become a much more situational weapon now. He seems to save it until those mid-rounds of the fight, but it does a number when he does land it. The power in those kicks are insane too. I was at UFC 265 when he fought Pedro Munoz, and you could hear the impact from that kick in the stands. He has shifted into a much more boxing-heavy style that seems to transition to grappling later into fights, or kind of reactively when his opponents lead the fights to it. His BJJ game is still pretty strong and is a danger on the ground as well. With Merab's insane cardio, when he gets you to the ground, he can throw relentlessly for days. In his fight against Moraes, he got to the point where he had thrown over like 100 strikes without taking one himself, and there is some concern to me in that if Aldo's taking too much damage, you could see him sort of switch off in the same way that Moraes did and struggle to defend or throw anything back once on the ground. I say that in reference to when Aldo fought Petr Yan, because it got to the point where he pretty much just stopped defending himself. In my opinion, that's Merab's path to victory. It's okay to stand and trade with Aldo a little bit, especially to set up level changes. When he gets caught, he does a great job of keeping moving and not allowing himself to get finished. It could be a part of, it could be in part to his amazing cardio. It will give him a little room for error, a little more than maybe most people, but ideally for him to win, he's going to have to get this fight to the ground and overwhelm Aldo with strikes. For Aldo, the path to victory, in my opinion, isn't much different from his past few fights. I do think he needs to start faster, given that this is a 3-round fight, but simply fend off the takedowns and keep striking. So long as he keeps the fight standing, eventually his power should ring through and he can catch Merab. If he gets into the second round, sprinkle in the leg kicks. Merab doesn't really check those, but he does need to be careful when throwing them. If Merab catches them, he could use it to level change. Now, looking at the odds, Merab is a -130 favorite and Aldo is a +110 underdog, and that's actually really surprising to me. I agree the fight should be close, but the odds I definitely think should be reversed. I don't see a reason why Aldo should be the underdog in this fight. I do understand that Aldo's getting older and the age could really hit him whatever, but from a stylistic standpoint, to me, it just doesn't make sense. Styles make fights, you know what I mean? Getting into my prediction for this fight, I'm going with Jose Aldo by a 3rd-round knockout. I think the first round there'll be quite a few exchanges. Merab will have a couple takedown stuff, and I think that he'll get rocked in that first round. In round 2, I think Aldo will ramp up the leg kicks, which will be effective, but Merab will get a hold of one of them, probably get the fight to the ground from there, but Aldo will eventually get back to his feet, probably from a scramble, and I think that he'll drop Merab towards the end of the round. And in the 3rd round, I think that he'll push the pressure, drop Merab multiple times before finding a finish. Now we move to the co-main event in the middleweight division, Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold. It's an interesting choice for a co-main event, certainly not the most important fight. They probably could have found something more important to put there, or even swapped it with the Aldo fight, but it's a fun fight and there should be a finish pretty much guaranteed in this fight. I'm not gonna lie, I did have to double check though if this was at middleweight or light heavyweight, due to both these guys' misadventures up a division, we'll say. In Costa's last fight, he came in horribly off on his weight cut. He had his fight with Marvin Vettori moved to a catchweight fight at first, and then it changed again to a light heavyweight bout, where he ultimately lost a decision. It marked his second loss in a row following a 13-0 start to his career. Rockhold is running a 2-fight losing streak as well, coming off a knockout losses to Jan Blachowicz and Yoel Romero. Who did Rockhold piss off to get this run of Yoel, Jan, and then Costa? That man's chin has to be punching the air right now. Both these guys haven't been very active. Costa's fought twice since 2020. He took quite a bit of time off after his loss to Adesanya, and Rockhold's fought twice since 2018, but for Rockhold's sake, it was probably a good idea because he suffered some brutal knockouts. It'll be interesting to see how these two really match up once in the cage. Costa is a striker with relentless pressing and output, and Rockhold's a strong kickboxer with an underrated submission game to pair with it. Rockhold is 2 inches taller and holds a 5-inch reach advantage over Costa, and I think that he will really need to use that in order to get a win here. Obviously, he can't replicate the performance that Adesanya had against Costa. I don't think he can overwhelm Costa with throwing and showing, all these different options and just kind of overwhelming him mentally, but I do think there is some things to be taken away from Adesanya's performance against him. I think for Rockhold to win this fight, it is essential that he keeps his distance and doesn't get caught up against the fence. Throwing leg kicks would do him so much good to slow down Costa's smothering pressure and take some of that power out of his hands as well. I think that if he could get the fight to the ground, he could control it there and maybe even find a submission depending on the situation. I think he really could find one if he drops Costa and then jumps into a scramble with him, but there would be big danger of him getting caught in that scenario as well. I think this would be a good fight to look for the question mark kick too, leaning off of Adesanya. If you throw enough leg kicks, you could catch Costa once you switch it up to the head. Looking at path to victory for Costa, he's going to want to get on the inside. As we said, he has a very pressuring style, and I think that he just needs to be a little more defensive when marching forward. He takes too much excess damage that isn't really necessary. If he can get Rockhold against the cage, I think it's only a matter of time till he puts him out. Another good idea, in my opinion, would be to clinch up with him, as Rockhold is there to be caught when disengaging from the clinch. Looking at the odds, Costa is a minus 360 favorite and Rockhold's plus 295 underdog. I can agree with these odds. Rockhold's 37, he's been cracked a few times, and Costa's in his prime. For my prediction for this fight, I'm going with Paulo Costa by first round knockout. I think Rockhold won't be able to maintain the distance between them. I think Costa will push forward, take a couple of shots to get inside, land some big shots against Rockhold against the cage, and just put him out. I just don't trust Rockhold's chin at this point. Finally, we move on to the main event where Kamaru Usman defends his welterweight title versus Leon Edwards. This is a rematch as both these two fought back in 2015, really early on in their careers. Both these guys haven't lost since their last matchup. Leon Edwards has won 9 straight since then with a no contest, and Usman's won 13 straight since the fight, but I think he's 15 straight total in the UFC. I said 15 including Edwards. Usman can actually tie Anderson Silva's win streak record of 16 with a win in this fight. Both these guys have evolved quite a bit since then. Usman's style has changed a lot, and it makes you wonder how relevant the first fight is to this one. The first fight saw a heavy wrestling style Usman landing 5 takedowns. We haven't really seen that version of Usman since the first Masvidal fight. Usman now, he's much more striking heavy. The wrestling has become more of a second option and complement to the rest of his game. He has had some knee injuries and had to get surgery and stuff like that, so his knees are a little weaker. Makes sense that he's kind of pushed away from the wrestle heavy approach when he doesn't need. A lot of how this plays out will ultimately depend on how Usman chooses to approach this fight. Will he go to what he has already proven to work in the heavy wrestling, or will he continue his striking renaissance? I personally see him trying to stand and strike mainly in this fight. I could see him get a takedown or two to establish the threat of it, similar to the Masvidal and Covington fights. It'll open up his striking game more, put Edwards on the edge a little bit within their stand-up. Since the first fight, his striking has improved immensely, and the power in his shots have increased a ton as well due to the improvement in his form. I do think Leon is the better striker of the two, though. Leon Edwards would probably much prefer Usman to stand and trade with him. He's a good counterpuncher and can pick his shots against Usman, particularly in the later rounds if it makes it there, as it did look like Usman gassed a little bit towards the end of the second Covington fight. With that being said, they did carry a pretty wild pace in that fight. Edwards has pretty strong takedown defense. He gave Usman a lot of fight getting him to the ground in their first fight, and even when he was on the ground, he kind of was relentless in trying to get up. I don't think it would be a bad idea for Edwards to try and clinch up from some of this stuff takedowns, especially if he's pushed against the fence. I think he could start to land his killer elbows. He's continued to develop his jiu-jitsu game as well, which could play a role in either looking for a finish if Usman wrestles a lot, or even try to just deter him from looking for the takedown. And looking at past to victory for Leon Edwards, his best bet's going to be to keep this fight standing. The longer it is, the better his chances. As I said, clinching up might do him some benefit as well. If he can do some real damage with the elbows, I think that it would be worth it. I think the biggest thing for Leon is to not bite on the level change feints and to not really allow them to make him throw less. He can't limit his output simply because he's worried about getting taken down. That's kind of what happened in the first fight. For Usman, he could take the path he previously took to beat Edwards, but I do think he'll see more resistance resistance than last time with that path. He could win this fight standing up, but he'll need to establish the threat of the takedown. That should open up the striking a lot. He needs to make sure he doesn't get caught overextended though in their exchanges when standing up. I think that would be his biggest concern. He overextends on like a 2 or something, and then just gets caught by Leon. But for Usman, it's pretty straightforward, you know. Get a takedown or two, feint the takedowns from there on to open up the striking game, you know. If Leon's worried about the level change, you can catch him a little more with his hands down. Looking at the odds, Usman's a minus 340 favorite, and Leon's a plus 280 underdog. I don't think those are terrible, but I would have it a little closer than that. Maybe Usman at like minus 250. For my pick, I'm going with Usman by decision. I think he'll stand up with Leon early and have mixed success. I think he'll drop in one of the rounds, but I do think that Leon will probably take a round as well, a round or two maybe even. I think Usman will look to his wrestling in rounds 4 and 5, rounds 4 and or 5, really. Kind of pull through and win a close decision. So, those are my thoughts on the fights, my predictions. Feel free to drop your predictions and any thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't. I do really appreciate it. Hoping to hit 50 subscribers by the end of the month. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate y'all. Let's have a good one.